Robert Sinclair stood behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 40th floor of the Sinclair Tower, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter in the evening light. At 52, he commanded Sinclair Financial Group, an investment firm worth $3.8 billion that had grown from a small brokerage house into one of Wall Street's most influential players. Tonight's board meeting would finalize the acquisition of a European investment bank, a deal that would establish his company as a major force in international finance. His wife, Catherine Sinclair, sat gracefully in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, reviewing documents with the practiced eye of someone who had been integral to his business success. At 45, she was everything a Wall Street wife should be: elegant, intelligent, fluent in 3 languages, and possessing the social connections that had opened doors throughout Robert's career. Her family's old Boston money had provided the initial capital for his firm, while her European connections had made tonight's acquisition possible. The Swiss delegation confirmed their arrival for tomorrow morning, Catherine said in her refined accent, which carried hints of her boarding school education in France. "I've arranged dinner at Le Bernardin to celebrate once the papers are signed." Robert nodded absently, his attention focused on the merger documents that represented 18 months of complex negotiations. The European bank they were acquiring had operations in Geneva, London, and Paris, with assets that would triple Sinclair Financial's international portfolio. Catherine's fluency in French and her connections in European banking circles had been crucial to convincing the sellers that Sinclair Financial could be trusted with their legacy institution. "Have you heard anything more from the Paris office about the due diligence concerns?" Robert asked. Catherine's expression remained perfectly composed. "Marcel assured me this morning that all irregularities have been resolved. The audit will show clean books, exactly as we expected." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. "Excusez-moi," came a quiet voice from the doorway. "I need to empty the trash before the evening meeting." Robert glanced briefly at the small woman who entered carrying cleaning supplies. Marie Dubois had worked as the night cleaning supervisor for Sinclair Financial for 4 years, maintaining the executive floors with the invisible efficiency that made her valuable to the building's management company. At 58, she was a French immigrant who had worked various cleaning jobs throughout New York while supporting her elderly mother and disabled brother back in Lyon. "Make it quick, Marie," Robert said without really looking at her. "We have important business to conclude." "Oui, Monsieur Sinclair," Marie replied in heavily accented English, though she had been born and raised in France before immigrating to America 15 years earlier. Her English was functional but limited, and most of the executives she served assumed she understood little of what occurred around her. What they didn't know was that Marie Dubois had spent 30 years as a senior accountant for Crédit Lyonnais before immigrating to America to care for her sick mother. Her French credentials hadn't been recognized in the United States, and language barriers had prevented her from finding work that matched her expertise. But her background in international banking had made her acutely aware of the conversations she overheard while cleaning offices, particularly when they involved the kind of European financial institutions she had once audited. As Marie quietly emptied waste baskets and cleaned surfaces, Catherine continued her discussion with Robert, occasionally switching to French when discussing sensitive details about the acquisition. She assumed that her husband's rudimentary French wasn't sufficient to follow complex business terminology, and that the cleaning lady certainly wouldn't understand the sophisticated financial concepts they were discussing. "Marcel m'a confirmé que les fonds Thomez ont été transférés avec succès," Catherine said in rapid French, her tone casual despite the gravity of her words. "L'audit ne trouvera aucune trace de détournement précédent." Marie's hands stilled almost imperceptibly as she processed what Catherine had just said. Marcel had confirmed that phantom funds had been successfully transferred, and the audit would find no trace of previous embezzlements. Marie's experience in banking fraud detection made the implications immediately clear. Catherine was discussing the successful concealment of stolen money. Robert, whose French was indeed limited to basic conversational phrases, nodded as if he understood. "Good, good. As long as everything is clean for the closing tomorrow." Catherine smiled and continued in French, apparently enjoying the freedom of speaking in a language she believed no one else in the room could follow. "Robert ne succombe rien. Une fois l'acquisition terminée, nous aurons accès à leur compte offshore. Marcel et moi pourrons transférer les fonds restants sans que personne ne s'en aperçoive." Marie felt her blood run cold as she understood that Catherine was telling someone named Marcel that Robert suspected nothing, and that once the acquisition was complete, they would have access to offshore accounts that they planned to raid without detection. Et après? Came Catherine's voice again in French, as if she was reading from notes. Après le transfert, nous pourrons faire en sorte que Robert soit tenu responsable de toute irrégularité découverte plus tard. Il sera le parfait bouc émissaire. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place for Marie. Catherine was planning to frame Robert for the embezzlement after stealing the money herself. He would become the perfect scapegoat for financial crimes he didn't even know were being committed. Marie continued her cleaning with shaking hands, trying to maintain her invisible presence while her mind raced through the implications of what she had overheard. This wasn't just business fraud. This was a systematic betrayal by a wife who was planning to destroy her husband's career and reputation after stealing millions of dollars from the companies he was trying to legitimately acquire. Catherine's phone buzzed and she answered in French. Allô, Marcel? Oui, tout se déroule comme prévu. Robert signera les papiers demain matin sans se douter de rien. As Catherine continued her conversation, confirming plans with someone named Marcel, Marie realized she was witnessing the final stages of an elaborate con game. Catherine wasn't just Robert's wife and business partner. She was actively working to destroy him while using his trust and resources to facilitate her own crimes. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Catherine providing updates on Robert's schedule, the signing ceremony, and her confidence that he remained completely unaware of the trap being set around him. When she finally ended the call, she returned to English and her role as the supportive wife helping with legitimate business. Everything is set for tomorrow, she said to Robert with a warm smile. This acquisition will be the crowning achievement of your career. Marie finished her cleaning and prepared to leave, but the weight of what she had overheard made her feel sick to her stomach. She had spent 4 years watching Robert work late into the night, building his company with genuine dedication and treating his employees with fairness and respect. She had seen him agonize over difficult decisions, celebrate his team's successes, and worry about his responsibility to investors and clients. Now she knew that the woman he trusted most in the world was systematically betraying him, using his own ambitions as weapons against him. Tomorrow morning, Robert would sign documents that he believed represented his greatest business triumph, not knowing that he was actually signing his own financial death warrant. As Marie reached the office door, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of leaving quietly as she had for 4 years, she turned back toward Robert's desk. Monsieur Sinclair, she said softly, her voice carrying more confidence than either Robert or Catherine had ever heard from her. Robert looked up from his documents with mild irritation. What is it, Marie? We're quite busy. Marie glanced at Catherine, who was watching with the polite but dismissive expression she reserved for service workers, then looked directly at Robert. When she spoke, her voice was clear and her accent, while still present, was less pronounced than usual. Monsieur Sinclair, je dois vous dire quelque chose d'important. Votre femme ment. The effect was immediate and devastating. Robert stared at Marie in shock, not because he fully understood her French, but because he had never heard his cleaning lady speak with such authority and urgency. Catherine, however, went completely pale as she realized that Marie had understood every word of her previous conversations. What did she just say? Robert asked, looking between the two women. Catherine recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. I have no idea, Marie, you're being very inappropriate. Please finish your work and leave. But Marie had crossed a line she couldn't retreat from. She had spent too many years watching wealthy people destroy themselves and others through greed and betrayal. This time, she would not remain silent. Monsieur Sinclair, she said in careful English, I said your wife lies, but there is much more you need to know. Robert stood slowly, his instincts telling him that something significant was happening, even if he couldn't yet understand what. Marie, what are you talking about? Catherine stepped forward aggressively. Robert, this woman is obviously confused or trying to cause trouble. I think we should call security. Non, Marie said firmly, then switched to English. Mr. Sinclair, for 4 years I clean your office and hear many things. Tonight, your wife speaks in French because she thinks no one understands. But I am French, and I understand everything she says. Robert felt a cold dread forming in his stomach. What did you hear, Marie? Marie took a deep breath and began recounting Catherine's French conversations, translating each damning phrase into English. As she spoke, Robert's face cycled through disbelief, horror, and finally rage as he understood the scope of his wife's betrayal. She told someone named Marcel that you suspect nothing, Marie continued. That after tomorrow's signing, they will have access to offshore accounts that they plan to steal from. And that when the theft is discovered, you will be blamed for everything. Catherine had gone from pale to ashen as Marie's translation exposed her elaborate deception. Robert, you can't seriously believe this cleaning woman over your own wife. She's obviously misunderstood. Did you or did you not have a phone conversation in French while Marie was in this room? Robert demanded. Yes, but it was just routine business. With someone named Marcel about phantom funds and making me a scapegoat? Catherine's silence was more damning than any confession. Robert sank into his chair as the full implications hit him. His wife, of 15 years, his business partner, the woman who had access to all his financial information and signing authority on his accounts, had been systematically setting him up for the largest financial fraud in his company's history. Marie, Robert said quietly, are you certain about what you heard? Oui, monsieur. I worked for 30 years at Crédit Lyonnais in France before coming to America. I understand banking fraud very well. What your wife described is sophisticated embezzlement designed to steal millions while making you responsible for the crimes. Robert stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in their marriage. Catherine, I want you to leave, now. Don't take anything. Don't touch any company documents. Just leave. Robert, you're making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you, Robert replied coldly. Marie, I need you to tell me everything you remember about those conversations. Every detail. As Catherine gathered her purse and walked toward the door, she turned back with an expression of pure venom. You'll regret this, Robert. You have no idea what you've just done. I've just saved my company and my reputation, Robert replied. Thanks to a woman who had more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. After Catherine left, Marie spent the next 2 hours providing Robert with detailed accounts of everything she had overheard during her 4 years of cleaning his office. Her background in banking allowed her to explain the sophisticated nature of the fraud that had been planned, while her perfect recall of French conversations provided evidence that would be crucial in the legal battles to come. Marie, Robert said as they finished going through her testimony, I need to ask you something. Why did you decide to tell me? You could have just finished your cleaning and left, and no one would have known you understood. Marie considered her answer carefully. Monsieur Sinclair, I have watched you work for 4 years. You are a good man who treats people with respect, even people like me who are invisible to most rich people. I could not watch evil people destroy a good man just for money. Robert felt tears in his eyes as he realized that his salvation had come from someone he had barely noticed, someone whose intelligence and integrity had been hidden beneath a uniform and an accent. Marie, I want you to know that your cleaning days are over, if that's what you choose. But more importantly, you've saved me from complete destruction. I am happy to help, Marie replied simply. Sometimes people who clean up see things that others miss. The next morning, instead of signing acquisition papers, Robert met with FBI agents and forensic accountants. The European bank deal was exposed as an elaborate front for money laundering, with Catherine and her accomplice Marcel having planned to steal over $200 million while framing Robert for their crimes. Catherine was arrested at JFK Airport, attempting to board a flight to Switzerland with forged documents and a suitcase full of bearer bonds. Marcel was captured in Geneva, where authorities discovered offshore accounts containing funds stolen from dozens of American investors over a period of 5 years. The investigation revealed that Catherine's entire relationship with Robert had been a long-term con game, designed to gain access to his growing financial empire. Her old Boston money family background was fabricated, her European banking connections were criminal associates, and even her boarding school accent was carefully cultivated to support her false identity. 3 months later, Marie Dubois sat in the office that had once been Catherine's, reviewing financial documents as Sinclair Financial's new director of internal auditing. Her French banking credentials had been recognized and validated. Her salary was more than she had earned in her entire previous career, and her expertise in fraud detection had already saved the company from 3 attempted infiltrations by other con artists. Marie, Robert said as he reviewed her latest security report, I want you to know that the cleaning lady who spoke French didn't just save my company, she saved my life. I was about to sign documents that would have sent me to prison for decades, while the people I trusted most stole everything I had worked to build. Marie smiled, looking up from the forensic accounting software she was using to review international transactions. Monsieur Sinclair, I learned long ago that people reveal their true selves when they think no one important is listening. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are spoken in foreign languages by people who believe they are invisible. Robert's life was indeed never the same after that night. He had lost his wife but gained something more valuable: the knowledge that wisdom and integrity often wear uniforms and speak with accents, and that the people who clean up after the powerful sometimes hold the keys to exposing the corruption that wealth and status try to conceal. The cleaning lady who spoke French had taught him that trust must be earned through actions, not assumed through relationships, and that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected voices, speaking the most unwelcome truths. In the end, the French words that changed everything weren't, "I love you" or "I trust you," but simply, "Your wife lies." 3 words that exposed a web of deception and proved that honesty speaks every language, while betrayal eventually reveals itself to those who know how to listen. 2 years later, Robert stood before the Federal Court of Appeals as prosecutors announced the final sentences in what had become known as the Sinclair banking conspiracy. Catherine received 15 years for fraud and conspiracy, while Marcel got 22 years for his role as the criminal mastermind. The investigation had uncovered a network of similar schemes targeting 12 other wealthy businessmen, all of whom had been saved by the evidence Marie's testimony had revealed. During the sentencing hearing, Robert took the witness stand one final time. "Your Honor, I want the court to understand that this case was solved not by expensive investigators or sophisticated technology, but by a cleaning lady who had the courage to speak truth to power. Marie Dubois risked her job, her safety, and her future to save a man who had barely acknowledged her existence for 4 years." Judge Harrison looked toward the gallery where Marie sat with her daughter, who had flown in from France for the proceedings. "Mrs. Dubois, would you stand, please?" Marie rose slowly, still uncomfortable with being the center of attention in such formal settings. "Mrs. Dubois," the judge continued, "your testimony has not only prevented a massive financial fraud, but has led to reforms in banking oversight that will protect countless other victims. The court recognizes that true heroism often comes from unexpected sources." After the hearing, Robert and Marie walked through the courthouse plaza where media crews waited for statements. Robert had learned to deflect most interview requests, but today he wanted to speak publicly about the lesson he had learned. "A cleaning lady spoke French and saved my life," he told the assembled reporters. "But more than that, she taught me that the people we overlook, dismiss, or take for granted are often the ones with the clearest view of what's really happening around us." I spent 4 years treating Marie Dubois as invisible, never realizing that she was the most qualified person in my building to recognize financial fraud. Marie stood beside him, no longer the invisible woman in a gray uniform, but a respected professional whose expertise had transformed both their lives. "I learned in France that criminals always make one mistake," she said in her still accented but now confident English. "They believe that people they consider unimportant are not paying attention. But we are always paying attention." We see everything. 5 years later, the Marie Dubois Institute for Financial Integrity had become one of America's leading fraud detection organizations, staffed primarily by immigrants whose foreign credentials had been overlooked by traditional employers. Under Marie's leadership, the institute had exposed dozens of international financial conspiracies and saved American businesses over $2 billion in potential losses. Robert served on the Institute's board of directors, having learned that the most valuable business advice often comes from those who have been invisible the longest. Every year on the anniversary of that night in his office, he would visit Marie's old apartment building in Queens and personally thank the landlord who had recommended her for the cleaning job that changed both their lives. "Your wife lies" had been 3 French words that destroyed a marriage, but they had also built something more valuable, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared integrity, and the recognition that wisdom speaks every language fluently, while deception eventually betrays itself to those who know how to listen. The CEO's life was indeed never the same, but it was infinitely better, cleaner, and more honest than the lie he had been living. Sometimes the most important conversations happen between people who don't share the same native language, but who share the same commitment to truth. The end.